Hello and welcome. My name is Gabby Sanchez-Jones, and I'm the manager of Alumni Clubs and Diverse Communities Engagement here at the University of Utah's Office of Alumni Relations. I'd like to thank you all for joining today's event, Latinx in the Workplace. This event is part of our U Alumni Virtual Event Series, in which we host one event per month centered on careers, mentoring, or networking. Throughout this event, we will have the chance to hear from two fantastic University of Utah alumni who will be sharing their insights into this topic. If you have any questions for our presenters, you can use the YouTube chat function to share them, and we will be facilitating a Q&A at the end of the event. Our first presenter will be Ross Romero, who graduated from the University of Utah with his bachelor's degree and then moved on to the University of Michigan to receive his law degree. He is a Salt Lake City-based attorney with consultant with an extensive background in commercial litigation, labor and employment, and government relations. He is a principal at Inclusion Strategies, assisting clients with government relations and needs at the local, state, and national level. He also consults in a number of areas, including diversity and inclusion, with an emphasis in workforce talent and development. Ross was also a senior advisor for the Michael Best Strategies of Milwaukee and spent a decade at Zions Bank. He retired from Zions as a vice president in the Community Development Group. In that role, he assisted local and state government and corporate accounts with banking and business operational needs, worked with elected and appointed officials in Utah and Idaho, and advocated with the Utah U.S. congressional members. Previously, Romero was a shareholder in a full-service Salt Lake law firm focusing on business litigation. He represented clients in both state and federal courts as a trial counsel. After serving in the Utah House of Representatives and Utah Senate, Romero continued his community service as a commissioner with the White House Commission on Presidential Scholars and as a member of the U Alumni Board. He serves on the board of Utah Hospital Association and Institute for Diversity and Health Equity. Thank you for joining us today, Ross. Our next alumnus is Reyna Viejos, who graduated in 2019 with her bachelor's degree and just this past year in 2020 with a master's in social work. She's currently pursuing her social work licensure while working at Comunidades Unidas as their development officer, as well as working in the Salt Lake City Public Library system. As a Latina and part of a first-generation American and first-generation college student in her family, as she pursued higher education, she was inspired by mentors and became a mentor herself and has consistently worked to engage and work to strengthen the community. She has participated in Salt Lake City's Amigos Mentores, volunteered with the U Crimson members, Latinos in Action, the Bachelor's of Social Work Pre-BSW Liaison Program, and the FAMTORship for Social Justice Mentoring Program at the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office here at the University of Utah. Today, we will start by hearing presentations from each of these alumni. We'll begin with Ross Romero and then move over to Reyna. Ross.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the University of Utah alumni community, and let me pull up my presentation and begin. So again, just a thank you. Again, Ross Romero is my name with Inclusion Strategies. I figured it would be helpful to understand the population that exists here in the United States as well as in Utah. So a bit of demographic information. There are over 328 million people in the United States. The US Latino Hispanic population is 18%. You'll see there the Black or African American is 14.2 and the Asian American community is 6.8. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the growth that's been occurring in our nation relative to the Latino community specifically. And so between 2010 and 2019, the Latino share of the US population increased from 16 to 18%. And Latinos accounted for about half of all US population growth in this period. I provide this graph so you can see where the population is occurring most throughout the United States. Again, this is in that period 2010 to 2019, and a significant growth in the West, but also in other areas as well. This information comes from Statista Research, and it talks about where are the immigrants coming from. Again, the U.S. Latino Hispanic population comes from many different countries. And so where are they coming from? Who makes up our great nation? You'll see that 36 million are of Mexican descent. The next largest Hispanic group are Puerto Rican at 5.7 million, Cubans at 2.3 million. And we saw some of the Cuban influence, by the way, politically this year down in Florida. There was some discussion around the presidential race and how they were voting. And so speaks to that concentration. Most Hispanics are bilingual. They speak both Spanish and English. And if we look at those that are foreign born, how do they describe themselves and their ability to engage in English? 36% as of 2017 said they spoke English very well, and 21% stated that they spoke English less than very well. So obviously there's an acculturation going on, but some are still in that process. Language proficiency matters as it relates to workforce. And of course, what we're talking about are demographics and workforce, who are going to be working in our companies and in our community in the years to come. So language proficiency can have a limiting factor in that, obviously. And I would point out that there is a higher rate of unemployment amongst the Latino community as opposed to the majority community. You'll see that in 2019, when the economy was going like gangbusters, the unemployment rate was 4.3%. And for the rest of the US population, it was 3.4%. Skip forward to 2020 in the year of pandemic, and that increased for the Hispanic community to 10.4%. That's also pretty interesting when you consider many times Hispanics and communities of color were doing jobs that were considered essential. So even with essential service jobs being performed, they still had a pretty high concentration rate of unemployment. You'll also see that the number of employed Latinos in 2020 was 25.9 million. And interestingly enough, the projected Hispanic population in the United States in 2050 is expected to be 99.8 million, just reflecting back in 2019, it was 60 million. Another interesting statistic, 66,000 Latinos are turning 18 each month. So what I have told clients I consult with and others, our country is becoming grayer and it's becoming browner. Grayer because many of the baby boomers are moving into the retirement years, and they are being replaced in about equal numbers with the Latino population that is turning 18 and moving into this job period. So another article talks about where are the workers? So I'll give to you this Closing Latino Labor Market Gap piece when it talks about the Latino population representing what percentage of the workforce. In 2018, it was 17.8%. However, Latinos are concentrated in many different industries, not surprisingly in construction at 27.6%, in agriculture and farming at 31.6%, and then in hospitality and food service at 23.8%. So when you think about even our state's economy and how important agriculture is and how important tourism is, and certainly as it relates to construction, we have shortage of housing. A lot of this is sometimes limited by the workforce that is in our communities. I also wanted to point out the educational attainment. So in 2018, 17% of all Latinos older than 25 had a bachelor's degree or higher. And that's pretty good. I can tell you that it is on the rise, but compared to the white population, that's at 36.3%. So there is a delta that needs to be closed for workforce reasons. I'll also mention in 2018, 34.4% of US residents of Latino were foreign born. And as compared to the non-white community, that's 4.8%. So you'll often see a lot of family of mixed status, some that are documented and some that are undocumented, or some that are in the process of being naturalized, or they are DACA students that are here with work permission. and trying to get citizenship. And of course, we've seen that conversation play out in Washington, D.C. The Federal Reserve Board in 2019 indicated that unemployment and underemployment disproportionately affects Latino households. Some 49.8% of Latinos surveyed expressed that they wanted to work or work more, compared to only 26.5% of the non-Hispanic white residents. So respondents. So again, what you're seeing is that there is more desire to work more and to move up into work opportunities, and somewhat is stymied maybe for language reasons or maybe for educational attainment, but there's this huge bent up demand, which is important to recognize. So how are our Latinas doing? How are the women doing? As per an article on December 31st, 2019, 61% of Latinas are participating in the labor force. Overall, that's higher than 59% of the overall rate of females. By 2028, Latinas are forecast to account for 9.2% of the total labor force, up from 7.5% in 2018. You'll also see that Latinas are getting more educated. They're staying in college. And so that has doubled in the last 10 years, now at 4.8 million, increasing their ability to engage in the workforce. Enrollment data shows a significant portion of Latinas remain enrolled in school after age 21, suggesting they are pursuing graduate degrees. I'll say this was actually brought to my attention and the difference between women and men by the president of Westminster College. She recognized that there were many more Latinas in higher ed than Latinos. And it's a challenge that we're going to have to address because we have to make sure that there are both cohorts increasing in numbers, but it is a problem when one gender is so significantly lower than the other. Despite both labor market and educational gains, however, Latinas lag in wages with their median weekly earnings at $661. So this should improve with educational attainment and with longevity in job, but it is clearly a challenge that we need to be aware of. Latinas also are becoming increasingly independent. They're becoming business owners, and you'll see that reflected in the numbers. From 2007 to 2012, Latina-owned companies increased by 87%. So what is indicative of the Latino community is very entrepreneurial, somewhat because they're not getting opportunities with major employers or with another company. So they're creating companies of their own. And so they're very entrepreneurial minded in that way. Between 2013 and 2015, 74% of Latinas enrolled in college immediately upon completing high school versus 72% of non-Latina females. So again, they are particularly seeing the value of higher ed. And they are also, as this stat indicates, they're buying homes and they're becoming first-time home buyers. I will recognize that this is at a time when interest rates are very low and there is a lot of interest in lending and having people be home buyers. So obviously something to recognize. By 2027, Latino students will comprise nearly 30% of all U.S. Latino population, student population. So again, this is critical. And we're seeing this, by the way, in our schools in Utah. There are several schools now that are majority minority districts. And that's reflective of the concentration and the diversity that exists in our schools. And Utah is no different in that way. By 2014, 35% of all U.S. Latinos age 18 to 24 were enrolled in college. So again, increasing. The increase in college enrollment is larger among Latinos than any other cohort. Keep in mind that they also started at a lower percentage. So it's not surprising that we're seeing this shift into higher ed and opportunities. It's important to note, but again, I would just stress that there needs to be significantly more Latinos, both men and women, involved in higher ed to get to the national average and where we need for jobs of the future. I was at a presentation for the folks that do patents and registrations nationally. And they said, we need to get all of our youth in this country to be more interested in science and math, because we are, as a country, falling behind patents that are being created in China and other parts of the world. But China was mentioned specifically. Consequently, we need to make sure that we are moving our masses through these math and science opportunities, because the demand is there, and we need to make sure that we increase that talent pool. 86% of all net new businesses were formed by Latinos. So this is a stat based on 2020. So you're seeing a lot of a growth that's occurred in the Latino community relative to being entrepreneurial, right? In the last decades, Latino launched the majority of all new businesses in the United States, generating almost 4.3 million new companies and creating 3 million American jobs. So again, helping others along the way. This information is from 2016, but it talks about projections, and so I thought it was worth sharing. Hispanics now represent more than 25% of all children under the age of 5, and are projected to represent 39% of the population under the age of 5 by 2060. So again, this is what I'm talking about the changing demographic of our country. Among high school students, Hispanics represent 22% of all students, the second highest representation behind white students. So again, growth is occurring. And in higher ed, Hispanics represent 16% of college undergraduates. In the U.S. Department of Education projects that Latino post-secondary enrollment will grow by 34% between 2012 and 2023, the largest rate of increase of all racial or ethnic groups. It's also reflective of what's going on in the population. By 2060, 56% of the US population will be a member of a minority group. So again, not necessarily just Hispanic Latino, but that changing demographics that are occurring in our country. And you'll see that even now with states like Texas and California, New Mexico, and Hawaii, where minorities are the majority population. And of course, in those states, except for Hawaii, it's the Hispanic community that is the majority community. These changing demographics are driven by US-born Hispanics. So oftentimes we wonder, is this from an influx of immigration, or is this the domestic third, fourth, second generation of US? And it is the latter. And you'll see that 9 out of 10 Hispanic children in the United States are native born. So much of this that's occurring is occurring within the United States established population. I'm not going to give you all this information, but suffice it to say that there is significant growth occurring. Let's just talk a little bit about the age, and this is reflective again of that youth that's kind of in the pipeline coming. The median age for Hispanics in the workforce is 27 versus 37 for the U.S. workforce overall. And this is specific to workforce, by the way. It's also important, as we've underlaid again, about what's going on in the educational attainment and the numbers that are occurring. And so this is a little bit of a repeat of what we've discussed before. So what does Utah look like, right? We've had this conversation about the US. Now, how does it relate to us here in Utah? So I'll give to you that based on 2019 US Census information, there were 3.2 million people in the state of Utah. You'll see that the Utah Hispanic population is 14.4%. Again, comparing that to the US population, 18%. So certainly tracking with that trend, although not as high. And the other numbers for other different ethnic groups here in Utah. How does it relate to the immigrant status of who are the Latinos here in Utah? Well, there are 269,200 in 2017 who were immigrants. And nearly 12% of the self-employed business owners were immigrants. So again, you're still seeing that entrepreneurial effort. And 1 in 9 workers in Utah labor force was an immigrant, again, back in 2017. This is a slide that I shared, which comes from the Kim Gardner Policy Institute. So proper credit to them, and Pam Perlich, who does wonderful demographic work for the state of Utah. And it's talking about how do we look as a state compared to how others look. You'll see that Utah's rate of growth is at 1.9%. And so our region has had significant growth compared to others. And you've seen others up here that have loss of population, New York being specific, right? And so our region is one that is experiencing growth. If you look at where is that growth going in our state, so this is a projection of population change per county between 2015 and 2065. And I realize this is a little hard to see, but I will just say that the population rate growth increase in Utah County is over 1 million. And in Salt Lake County, it's about 600,000. So I'll also bring to your attention that Salt Lake County is the only county of the first class, but you are seeing tremendous growth in Utah County, and you will see population shifts. You will see influence shift in our state of Utah into Utah County over the course of several years. Now, it won't replace the capital city, but it will exert additional influence and population. So this is a snapshot of the U.S. foreign-born population. Again, we've gone through some of this, but in 2017, by way of share, it was 13.7% of the U.S. population, and I give you that just to compare it to the Utah foreign-born population, which is 8.7%. So again, you'll see this trend where we have dipped, and it is climbing. You also saw, by the way, during the Trump presidency, a fair number of immigrant population move back to home countries, particularly Mexico. And in the news recently, you've seen an influx of that population wanting to shift back into the United States. Again, who are we by way of the ethnicity in the state of Utah? So you'll see this is rate of growth, by the way. So this is not total population, but a 41% rate of growth in that 1 year, 2016 to 2017%. And if you break that minority population out, 58% of that population growth change came from the Hispanic community, with the other communities there represented. And so it's just indicative of what's occurring in our state is following trends of what's occurring in the nation. This is an important slide to recognize. I often counsel employers about where workforce is and where workforce is coming from. Well, this is a great illustration of that. In 2017, the population of who was in the state of Utah, 74% is white, right? But by 2060, this is, again, based on who are the youth, it's expected to be 26.3%. So this pipeline is coming, and they will be increasingly entering this workforce. Again, that's 66,000 Latinos turning 18 every month. This is just a reflection of that same information. Utah started, I would say, at a lower point in 1960 with minority share population. We have had tremendous growth to 2017, and it's followed that same trend line with the US, although slightly different numbers. You'll see that this was based on 2015 population estimates. So in another slide I had, this was 20%. I think it's actually closer to 20%, but obviously still very relevant to the growth and to the trend. This is a slide that talks about where this population is vis-a-vis city, county, and state, right? So Salt Lake City, as a for instance, in 2020, has a minority population of 40%. That is tremendous representation. Salt Lake County, it's about 31%. So, highly concentrated areas of diversity in our state. less as you move outside of the Wasatch Front and even Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, but increasingly moving out to the rest of the state. This is a slide that just lets you know how to reach me and what I do. I try to tell individuals that I help businesses and employers understand the value and opportunity of working with and hiring a diverse workforce and creating strategies for an inclusive and profitable workplace. I think these things need to go hand in glove. The final thing I'll bring to your attention is that in February of this year, the Utah Foundation put a report out titled A Look at Utah's Hispanic Latino Population. And to the extent you want more information about what's going on here and the challenges that exist in the Utah Latino population, I would commend that report for your review. Thank you for your attention to this and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Ross. And we will be sharing Ross's LinkedIn page in the YouTube chat. So if you would like to reach out to him via those channels to connect with him about this work, please feel free to do so. I would now like to invite Reyna to present her information and her work in the community. Let's
Not working. But can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll start. Thank you for having me here. Good afternoon. I'll be talking about the unique challenges and the qualities that Latinx communities or that we possess in the workplace. Let me share my screen. Okay. So my name is Reyna Viejos, and this is mostly of my experience of what I've seen in the workplace. Some of the unique challenges that I have seen Latinos face in the workplace, and I even myself. So there's roadblocks. The first generation college students, such as being a first generation college student, I didn't know about college, where to start or anything. My dad didn't have a schooling. He never had the opportunity to go to school, so he has zero knowledge of schooling. His level of education, it was zero, so it was up to me to find out more about the college and how navigating through the college, because I didn't have that in my family background. Another challenge that we see is the access in the higher education. High tuition payments in states where they do not offer state tuition for undocumented students. I remember that the first time that I learned about this was when I was helping a student I was his mentor and in college. And one of the times that he mentioned was that how much tuition was for him to pay. And so compared when I was like just listening to him and seeing how I was taking 12 credits and he was only taking 6 credits, and just like the differences of how much he was paying for that was another challenge that I saw within the higher education. Another challenge was that Latinos are most likely to work in services in services industries, meaning that they would work in such as construction, agriculture, and cleaning and maintenance occupations. This could be part of the immigration status, and sometimes because of the English proficiency. Another is because of the lack of knowledge of how to navigate or search for the job. So these are some of the challenges that I have seen. There's more challenges, but one of the things that I would say is that even though with all these challenges that we do have qualities, we do possess unique skills that we can provide and contribute to the workplace. Some of those unique challenges qualities that we possess is that we are hard workers. My dad, one of the things that he actually, or I learned something from him, is that he's a hard worker. He's a single parent. And so he taught me to just be a hard worker, just seeing him working. He's been working for this company for 20 years. And so just seeing him with his hard work, it has inspired me to also be a hard worker as myself. And he also taught me perseverance, which is part of the hardworking, as we work really hard to achieve our goals and support ourselves and our families in the near future. Another thing that I see that it's a quality for the Latinx community is motivation. We are really motivated. We come here with a some of us come with an American dream, and so we work really hard to get into our dreams. What is our dream? For me, my dream was to get a higher education and graduate, be the first one in my family to get that education. And so I was really motivated to continue and get my education, and that was motivation. Professional growth. So that's another qualities that we possess. We seek professional growth not only in our workplace, but also in our academic education. According to the Pew Research, educational attainment in Latinos has increased in recent years. This is an indication that we are inspiring to gain professional growth. And also Ross mentioned this, that we are growing as we go on and we are getting more higher education. Another thing that we have for qualities that we bring to our workforce and workplaces is the strong values. We have strong sense of loyalty to our families, which resonates with the strong senses of loyalty we have for the company or the organization that we work for. We are ready to learn and continue to work in our community. So I just wanted to share a little bit about myself. When I first started working in the workforce back in 2011, I was unaware of how important the Latinx community play in the workplace until I started working at the library. So that library was my first paid job that I had, and because of that opportunity working there, I was able to see how essential it is for us Latinos, our Latinx community, to be in that place and share our knowledge. I started as an aide and later became an assistant, where I was able to utilize my skills, especially my bilingual skills, my background, my diverse knowledge and perspectives. In this position, I also play a role in being able to communicate with not Spanish speaking only patrons. And that allowed me to communicate also with staff. So I was kind of like in the middle where I could communicate with both the community and the staff that didn't speak Spanish. So that helped us to reach out more of our community and understand the needs of our community as well. Because of these experiences where I was working in that place, there were and seeing that I was able to contribute and sharing my skills, I had a strong desire for self-improvement. Working at the library, I wanted to be able to help more my community. At that time, I had my computer skills weren't so great, and so I wanted to learn more about that. So I went to college and got more education about how I can help my community and also empower them so they can also learn about more how they can improve themselves. So with that, I came across with Comunidades Unidas. One of these opportunities when I was at Solar Community College is that for part of my internship, I was introduced to Comunidades Unidas. This was how during this time I did an internship where I was coming to the community where I didn't really know so much about what was happening in my community. Even though I was aware of them, it wasn't something that I was actually really in it until I came to see you. With them, I was able here at Comunidades Unidas, I was able to work with the staff and also promotoras, or what we call community health workers, and volunteers, where I was so awe-inspired by their hard work and dedication that they all play towards the organization in our community. It was amazing to see that how Latinx promotoras, or community health workers, were working to empower our community. After being there and experiencing all of this, Comunidades Unidas became a very special in my heart. Oh my goodness, I'm getting emotional. Because I felt safe, I feel trusted and included in a sense of belonging on this line of work. After my internship, I stayed as a volunteer, which later in a couple of years in 2020, I came back and started as a part-timer. I started working as a part-time, and just a few weeks ago, I was able to get hired for the development manager at Comunidades Unidas. So one of the things that I learned from here is that bringing my skills and sharing my skills and then building up each other together, we can make a difference in our community. So I'll talk, so that was more of an experience. I'll be talking about Comunidades Unidas, a little bit of that. So Comunidades Unidas mission is to empower Latinx community to recognize and achieve their own potentials and be a positive force for change in the larger community. Our vision is that every Latinx in Utah is a healthy, self-sufficient, and engaged member of that community. So this is our mission here working at Comunidades Unidas. Comunidades Unidas has 22 years of experience working in the community. It started with promotoras knocking on doors, and promotoras were volunteers. They knocked on doors and they saw the need in their community, and that's how Comunidades Unidas started. Our services our focus efforts are on the west side of Salt Lake County, including the cities with high numbers of Latinx communities such as Salt Lake City, West Valley, Taylorsville, Kearns, and Magna. CUCM is part of the communities we served and we work with. So I would say that at least 98% or so, we identified as Latinx in the community. We are bilingual, or most of us are bilingual. We speak Spanish and English. So here are some of the programs that Comunidades Unidas have. So we have the preventative health program, our health booth, nutrition programs. We call Comiendo Rico y Sano, buying healthy and delicious food. We have a tobacco program, the SNAP or food stamps enrollment. Financial literacy programs, worker safety. We also have the immigration clinic, immigration resource line, and also we have a clinic for Know Your Rights. So here's a quote, together we can make a difference in our community. When you bring more Latinos, when you bring more diverse into the workplace, we can make a difference, we can contribute, we can be of support, and we can make the difference in our community. So I'll leave my information right here.
Thank you, Reyna. That was a wonderful presentation. We will now be transitioning into our Q&A session. So I'd like to invite both of our speakers to join us. We were able to get some questions submitted beforehand. So we will start with those, but of course, if you have any questions throughout the event, please feel free to use the YouTube chat to share them with us. So one of the things that I want to touch on as we continue this conversation to begin with is really important, at least from my perspective, which is just that the Latino community, Latinx, Hispanic, Chicano, none of our communities are actually monolithic. And we see the same thing within our other people of color, BIPOC brothers and sisters in the United States. So oftentimes we are grouped together, although our heritage is connected by single factors. We each have our own unique identities and experiences, unique heritages. And I think this is especially prevalent with our Latinx community. For example, there are 3 of us here on this call, each of which has a different origin story of how we connect to our own Latinidad. And I just think that's so essential for us to discuss today. As we start our conversation, we will take a look a little bit internally. So what can we change within our own community to support each other in the work environment, and specifically in the state of Utah, as we talk about the workforce here in the state of Utah? What can we change collectively, and how can we make progress to increase acceptance in the work environment in Utah?
I'm happy to weigh in, and I think some of this presentation hopefully helps with that. I try to talk to individuals and companies about, again, who makes up our community, right? And increasingly, it's just becoming more and more diverse. And so having conversations with diverse communities, and in this instance, the Latino community, although true for all communities of color, to have those conversations early. Because what we need to make sure for our youth is they know what jobs exist. We start building bridges quicker to internships and apprenticeships, to trade schools and to higher ed, so that we also know the educational attainment needed to fill these jobs. So, you can't wait to decide to be a mechanical engineer and start thinking you're going to be successful taking hard math and science your sophomore, junior year of college. Doesn't happen. So we need to have these conversations earlier, so that if you are interested in becoming a mechanical engineer or a doctor or something like that, we have these conversations sooner. We help find the right path, and then these individuals have a better work experience, a more fulfilling work opportunity, and longevity at workplace. And I think that's what every employer wants and what employees want. It's important to keep in mind that, you know, these are individuals like everyone trying to raise a family and become good community participants and all the other things. So anyway, I think these conversations help make sure the community at large knows what's coming.
I would also like to add educating ourselves to break down the negative stereotypes or biases that the Latinx community are currently exist in our system. We would need to, another thing is that we would need to ensure that the Latinx are integrated into an environment of respect. So we need to be, this is across all the groups, not just the Latinx, but all of us respecting each other. Respect is an important part of initiative to constructive change.
Could I add with that, Gabby? Because that's a great point. It's right now the AAPI community is experiencing, you know, obviously violence and hate, and so being an ally to communities is critically important. The LGBTQ community with Equality Utah has done a tremendous job courting advocates for inclusion, and I think all communities of color need to lean on others to, you know, engage in stepping in when things aren't right, to speaking out against hate, to looking at ways to make a difference and bring people in. And that includes gender very specifically. So I think that's an excellent point. And at this moment, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we need to be speaking up for the Asian American community.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. That is absolutely true and essential. That transitions well into a larger conversation about allyship. But I will also note, with the information that you provided, Ross, as we look and consider our youth, the future of our communities, we know that there are more and more biracial children who are now in our community, which means that while we identify with our individual communities and that existing communities that are there, we also know that our demographics will change and our culture will shift and evolve as we connect with each other. So as we continue the work, it's important to provide space for individual communities, but also, of course, to keep room for allyship and growth and really celebrating the intersectionality between identities within the scope in Utah as well as in the United States. Mm-hmm. So our next question, which we'll piggyback off of this conversation, so let's talk about the work environment. When we talk about colleagues as well as community members, that can be clients or otherwise, what does allyship look like at work for our Latinx community? What can colleagues and community members do to make the workplace more inclusive? And that can be twofold. That can be specifically for the Latinx community, but we know that these policies expand beyond any single identity.
I could start. I would say to take action by supporting the Latinx community in your workplace. So if you have Latinos working in your workplace, support them. Also advocate for that diversity in your workplace. If you don't have it yet, advocate for that, to have that diversity, and invite them to participate in staff meetings or in meetings that where their opinions are being heard, and actively include them in Latinx circles or groups where plans or decisions are being made. Another thing that I would say is invite underrepresented communities to participate in groups as panelists. Thank you for inviting us here, and keynote speakers at work, and also like in our community. But most importantly, respect one another.
I think that's great. Yes, I think that's right, Reyna. You know, I guess I would say there's a lot of attention right now being placed around inclusion and in our community, and I'll recognize that Utah has adopted a diversity compact, and it reflects need for change even in our state of Utah. And I commend the community for signing on to that. It's actually hosted at the Salt Lake Area Chamber of Commerce. If you haven't seen it and want to be a signer, I would urge you to do that. But it really talks about looking at your place of work and understanding who's there and who isn't there, and thinking about ways to broaden that opportunity to make sure it is reflective of all of Utah's communities. And I counsel a lot of businesses about the value of doing that. Yes, because it is the right thing to do, but also importantly, because it drives revenue and it drives better governance. If there is plenty of information out there that exists in corporate America that workplaces and boards that are diverse have better rates of return. They have people thinking around problems differently. They have people reaching out to communities of color differently to bring in revenue, to expand customers. And so it's very much a win-win where communities have been not brought in, are being included, and they're driving opportunity in the place of work. I'll give you one final, very specific instance, though, where I think it requires management to prod a little. Sometimes when we go to a big conference room and you ask about ideas, oftentimes those that haven't traditionally spoken up will not speak up. So one way around that is to make sure that the manager is trained to ask and call upon each person for their idea. It allows that person to give their input, to be called on for input. And importantly, when an idea comes from a woman in that context in particular, or from a person of color, make sure that they get the credit for that, because sometimes they aren't speaking up for themselves and they aren't asked for their opinion, and yet they have good opinions to share that will be of value. So, this whole effort of inclusion, it takes some training and takes some work, but you're going to get a better result.
I really like that you talked about training, because that's one of the really important, I think, key factors of learning about more diversity and bringing in more of diversity into the workplace. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yes.
Thank you both. That's such fantastic points brought up by both of you, especially as we consider the workplace. We know that psychological safety is now kind of a hot button issue when it comes to work environments and making sure that people feel that they can share new ideas, that they can speak up if they are historically marginalized within that space. And oftentimes we talk about it, we know that things need to change, but we don't necessarily know what the next steps are. And I found that as we engage in this work, one of the questions that comes up a lot is about the zero-sum mentality that centers EDI work within the community at large. So that means within the work environment, as we encounter privilege and systems of power that have existed for a long time, how can we work to move beyond that zero-sum mentality? How can we work to engage not just ourselves in better understanding privilege and how it plays into what we have access to in the work environment, but also as we engage with colleagues in senior leadership, how can we change that mentality surrounding privilege?
Well, I think that, obviously bringing in leadership and the C-suite into the conversation is critical. It's very hard to move a company culture from the bottom up. You need time, you need dedicated individuals, you need financial resources. And so it really is important to get the C-suite to understand the value. And there are several ways to get about that value and to get that buy-in, but that I would say is critical. And again, that's also why I talk so much about changing demographics, because there can be some tension in individuals who have held those traditional jobs thinking that they're going to be pushed aside for new communities. And I am very clear about the fact that that doesn't occur, because this cohort that's coming up needs to be trained. It needs education. It needs internal company growth. And so this isn't about displacing anyone. It's about recognizing who's coming and helping them get integrated and helping them be successful so that they can be part of the work community. The final thing I'll say is, when we talk about underemployment and unemployment of diverse communities, that's a problem for them, yes, but it's also a problem for us writ large, because that generation behind us is the generation that pays for our Social Security. it pays for the revenues to generate our government. And so, it's very appropriate and very helpful for us all to be bringing people along to their best, highest potential.
I would add that we need more support from people from privileged groups. We know that the people from privileged groups often support and make decisions for social justice, and thus we need their support. Another thing, it would be like, as Ross was mentioning, collaboration. We need to see each other as partners and not as enemies or competitors within this work, but partners that can actively share common values, goals, and that we can also share information or insights of certain issues or topics that we can. So yeah, just like the collaboration within all of us.
Thank you both. I think that's such a great point, that we're really in this work together. So as we engage and counteract privilege, we remember that systems of power don't just oppress one community, they consistently have oppressed multiple communities, and we know that they're deeply rooted. So as we engage in this work, we even as minorities, we constantly need to check ourselves and think, okay, now how can I bring along someone whose life experience is different than me, but who is still oppressed by the systems of power that exist? Our next question, building off of that once again, how can we encourage managers to help people feel safe in that environment? I know, Ross, you talked a little bit about trainings and things like that, but how can we help those community members, those employees, feel safe bringing up concerns without fear of identification or retaliation in the work environment?
Reyna, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I could go. I would say having empathetic connections and conversations with everyone, included minorities, in this case, like the Latinx community, can be a starting point. Another important connection is to build up trust. I think that trust, if you don't have the trust with a manager to talk about an issue, then you won't, you won't share anything. So that would be my thing: having empathetic connections and conversations, and building up trust with the Latinx community that's working at your workplace. I'm wondering for the other question, that it was where concerns questionnaires. Yeah. So that one was if it would be helpful to open up conversations where we could feel more welcome or more comfortable to come in and share our experiences or our perspectives of concerns. This is just a thought, but I was thinking about myself when I had filled out a survey or a questionnaire, and I have not fill out a blank or something. So I was just thinking about, like, why is it that I don't fill out this space? Sometimes it's because I don't understand the question, since English is my second language. Another thing is that I feel like I'm also going to be judged on whatever I say on that. So there's no trust that, that I could share honestly my answer. So yeah, that would be some of the things, that just having those open conversations or allow us to ask questions when we have them.
Yeah, so I will. I would agree with that. I'd also say that having accountability is important. So as we look to fill opportunities, there should be a requirement that there be diverse candidates in the pool. And so if there are no diverse candidates, then I would suggest you need to work with consultants that can help you find those different individuals or organizations that can help draw in that diversity pool. I'd also recognize that I advise clients that everyone is trying to move up, right? And there's only one CEO, but there's a lot of management and there's a lot of senior management. And so one of the things I think we need to start doing is holding managers accountable for what they are doing to promote and advance inclusion and diversity. So if you're not seeing in a particular vertical movement for diverse candidates, that is a concern, and that is the reason why we measure what's occurring. And you can do it either incentivizing through bonus, or you can penalize for holding promotion if that isn't occurring, right? This carrot and stick approach. I think both have value. And regardless of which you do or both, having an accountability in this work is critical, especially if you are really trying to make change. And I think once change and success comes, reinvestment is easy, right? Because you've gotten that value out of the exercise. And so that's the point where we need to get. And by the way, that's occurring outside the state in significant ways. If you look at the talent development that's occurring back east, with leadership opportunities, and in states with high diverse numbers, that's occurring because that talent is rising and is being moved up. And so I would suggest that we just need to think about structurally how we do it here.
Thank you both so much. I think you brought up some really fantastic points. And to me, that really reminds us that when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work environment, we don't have the ability or privilege to just pinpoint one specific part of work. We don't have just the ability to look at just promotion or just compensation or just the work environment. We actually need to take a really holistic view at how we look from the moment someone applies to a job to the moment someone leaves the institution or firm, why it is that they're hired, why it is that they are promoted or not promoted, what their compensation is, all the way through to if there is reoccurring departure from the firm, taking a hard look at what could be the cause of that, which I think is something that we oftentimes jump into trying to find solutions to specific problems that come up, but our real solutions will come when we take a step back and look at things holistically. Mm-hmm. Our next question, I will kind of pivot away from specific work environment and a little bit more into our community at large. So how can we, as a Latinx community, and I see now that we are almost out of time, so I will kind of wrap up with this. How can we, as a Latinx community within the state of Utah, within our University of Utah network as well, how can we network and connect with each other and help each other grow and improve? Obviously, there are three of us here on this call, each of whom has a different career and industry that we work in, different expertise, but I would love to hear from each of you about how you think we can promote and build each other up together.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in to say that, organizational engagement is important. Comunidades Unidas is one of those community partners. There is a professional organization called Alpha for the Latino community, so you can work there. There is Utah Coalition of La Raza. So there are organizations, and one that I really speak highly of is Latinos in Action. It's engaging Latino youth in high school to make sure that they are college ready, right? So I think that connecting with organizations that you affiliate with, I'm a member of the Hispanic National Bar Association and the Utah Minority Bar Association, because as a profession, that's where I have connection. And be open to talking with others in different areas and learning about other areas, either because you have an interest socially or professionally.
I was actually part of the Latinos in Action, not in high school, but in college at the university. So yeah, just getting connected. You could start with volunteering. If you don't have time to volunteer, go into their websites, learn more about like them, like the Latinos, us, like what we bring. I would also say, you can speak if you have friends, if you have family, if you go to church, you can always like find somebody that's from a diverse background and just talk to them, speak to them, learning more about like their experiences and how we can help each other. I know we talked about this, but more like Facebook, like this is social media stuff, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. If you have those, like follow them. And I know Comunidades Unidas has like a Facebook page. It has an Instagram page where you can follow and see what's going on in the community. So these are some of the ways that you can get involved if you don't want to volunteer. But yes.
Thank you both. Those are both fantastic ways. I will also mention the University of Utah has a Latinx alumni community, which seeks to enrich, empower, and engage Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Chicano graduates of the university. Our community strives to promote professional development opportunities, alumni engagement events, and opportunities to connect with current Latinx faculty, staff, and students, as well as our network at large. So as we continue to engage in this work, I invite all of you who attended today to consider joining our community, whether it's the Latinx community or some of our other communities, so that we can continue to grow our alumni network and connect with each other and have conversations like these, which are so essential to honoring and recognizing the unique experiences that are held here as college students, as well as when you are transitioning to the professional workspace. I'd like to thank both of our presenters for joining us today and giving of their time and insight and knowledge and personal experience to help us build our communities together. We hope that you will all consider joining us next month on Wednesday, April 28th for our next career and professional development event, which is titled Do's and Don'ts to Land the Job. Thank you all for joining us today. Yes, go Utes.